Okay, let's get started. When you think of Fatih Abdel Al, the first thing that probably comes to mind is high-level finance, tax law, right?
Absolutely. You immediately picture him as the former director of tax evasion control, a key figure in modern Egyptian financial regulation, definitely.
Yeah, someone deeply involved in the nuts and bolts of the modern economy and its legal framework.
Exactly, the intersection of state finance and law.
Well, today we're doing something a bit different. We're jumping back, way back, to look at his intellectual origins through a really remarkable find.
Ooh, what have we got?
It's an early manuscript he wrote, very early. The title is You Have Since Jove is
Wow. The vague criticisms of Islamic Sharia and the basis for response. Okay, yeah, that's definitely not a tax manual.
not at all. This shows us Fathi Abd el-Alal back when he had his license in law doing postgraduate work at Alexandria University. And he's not dealing with tax codes. He's, grappling with fundamental legal philosophy, the nature of law itself.
So this is him as a young scholar really shaping his foundational ideas before the finance, before the high-profile regulatory roles.
Exactly. And what's really striking, it jumps right out at you, is the dedication.
What does it say?
It's dedicated very explicitly to the spirit of the late President Gamal Abdel Nasser and the young people who died for Egypt.
Okay, so that places it firmly in a specific historical moment. We're talking post-revolution, Nasser-era nationalism.
Right. This isn't some dry academic exercise floating in space. He's tying this deep legal critique directly to the national project, to that specific political climate.
It suggests that, for him at least, defending Islamic law and building modern Egypt weren't separate things. They were maybe intertwined.
That seems to be the implication. And the whole work is structured around three huge questions. Big societal legal questions that were clearly hot topics back then.
Yeah, were they?
First, the compatibility issue. Did modern positive law, the secular codes, conflict with Sharia? Second, gender equality, a really thorny one. And third, something quite provocative, responsibility for violence within marriage.
Wow. Okay, those are definitely major battlegrounds.
Uh,
He wasn't shying away from the controversial stuff, even then.
Not at all. He seems to be setting himself up as a defender of Sharia's philosophical underpinnings against what he calls these vague, modern criticisms.
So a foundational thinker, not just a legal technician at this stage.
That's the picture emerging. So maybe before we tackle those big questions, let's just quickly touch on his academic background for this. How did he approach writing something like this?
Well, the source material gives us glimpses. His education tracks through the literary section into law. So he had that grounding in humanities as well as formal legal training.
Right, prepared for both philosophical and legal arguments.
And he seems very clear about why he's writing it. He states up front, it's not for personal gain or fame.
What was the goal then?
He says it's really about addressing these complex issues head-on because he felt the criticisms were damaging, confusing people, undermining Sharia's place as a valid source for modern life. He wanted to show it wasn't, deficient or outdated.
And he backs it up academically.
Oh, yes. It's not just opinion. He's referencing established scholars, people like Dr. Bedrain, Dr. Abu Zahra. He relies on detailed legal and religious sources.
Making the case that this needs serious scholarly attention.
Exactly. He's arguing that Sharia isn't just some historical relic. It's a sophisticated legal system capable of addressing modern complexities, and defending it requires real academic rigor.
Okay, that sets the stage nicely for the first big question he tackles. The relationship between positive law, the state's secular law, and Sharia. He asks,
did positive law violate Sharia? Right. And we need to remember what positive law meant then. Egypt, like many places, had adopted legal codes based heavily on European, mainly French, models, secular codes.
so the core issue is, can these imported secular laws coexist or integrate with Islamic Sharia?
That's the nub of it. And his answer isn't a simple yes or no. He argues for integration, but with a clear hierarchy.
How so?
He insists that Sharia is the fundamental wonya, the primary source. It's flexible, comprehensive, and should always inform any derived legislation, like the positive codes.
So he's not saying throw out the modern codes entirely.
Not necessarily. It's more like where there's a conflict or where the positive law is silent or inadequate, Sharia provides the more complete and just framework. The task is careful interpretation and harmonization, guided by Sharia principles.
And this is where it gets interesting, connecting to his later career. He specifically looks at finance, right? The issue of riba or usury in modern banking.
Yes, This is a key area he dives into. It was a huge challenge in the 60s. How do you build a modern national banking system which runs on credit and interest without violating the Sharia prohibition on riba?
A central tension. How did he approach resolving it?
His analysis is quite detailed here. He works hard to distinguish between prohibited riba, which he sees as exploitative, guaranteed interest on loans without shared risk, and lawful profit from trade or investment.
What's the difference in practical terms, according to him?
It seems to boil down to risk and partnership. He argues that riba is when interest is fixed, guaranteed, just for the use of money itself. The lender takes no real risk,
Okay.
but things like commercial credit, profit-sharing partnerships, investments where the capital provider shares in the potential loss as well as the potential gain. Those, he argues, are different. They align with Sharia's principles because there's shared risk, actual economic activity, not just charging for time.
So it's almost like he's laying the groundwork for what we'd now call Islamic finance principles, trying to find a Sharia-compliant way for the modern economy to function.
It certainly looks that way. Decades before it became a major global industry, he was tackling the core conceptual problem: how to make modern finance ethical and compliant from a Sharia perspective.
Fascinating. And he applies a similar logic to criminal law, too.
Yes, he examines the penal codes, again, often based on Western models, and questions where they might align or diverge from Sharia principles on crime and punishment. The overall theme in this section is clear. Sharia is comprehensive enough for modern life, including complex economic transactions.
So his conclusion on law is essentially one of potential compatibility, led by Sharia.
Compatibility through integration, yes, with Sharia as the foundational guide.
Okay, that brings us to the second and third questions. And here the focus shifts dramatically, doesn't it? From law and finance to, well, much more personal and potentially explosive social issues.
Absolutely. This is where he tackles debates about family, gender, and social justice head-on. Question 2 is direct.
Did the principle of equality between men and women find fault or deficiency in Sharia?
Again, quite a direct and maybe unexpected topic from someone we associate with tax law later on. What was the core issue he was addressing there?
The main debate seems to be around the concept of musawa, literal, numerical equality, versus adl, which is more like justice, equity, or fairness.
Ah, so a philosophical distinction.
Exactly. He seems to be arguing against the critique that Sharia is unjust because it doesn't mandate identical roles or rights for men and women in every single aspect. His position is that Sharia aims for adl, or overall justice and balance within the family and society, even if that doesn't always mean strict musawa.
How does he illustrate that, say, with inheritance or rules about testimony, which are often cited in these debates? He tends to frame it in terms of reciprocal rights and responsibilities. Take inheritance, for example. Where Sharia typically grants a male heir a larger share, he links this directly to the male's legal obligation under Sharia to financially support his wife, children, and potentially other female relatives.
So the argument is the greater share comes with greater financial duties.
Correct. The woman's share, though potentially smaller, is hers alone, with no such obligation attached. So he argues the system achieves a balance, an overall justice for the family unit, by balancing different rights with different responsibilities. It's not about individual sameness in every rule, but about the functioning and stability of the whole structure.
A structural defense, then, focused on the family unit's well-being as defined by Sharia principles.
Precisely. It's a defense of the system as a coherent whole designed for social stability. But then, right after that, he pivots to perhaps the most difficult question.
The third one.
Yes, what is refuse the one of the violence in exercising marital rights?
Wow, the fact that he's using the word violence and directly addressing it within the context of marriage rights in a legal treatise from that era, that's really telling.
It absolutely is. It shows this wasn't just an abstract problem. It was a real, recognized social issue that demanded serious thought, even within a defense of Sharia.
So how does he tackle this? Does he blame the law itself?
This is where his analysis makes a critical shift. He strongly distinguishes between the legal principles themselves and how people apply or, more accurately, misapply them.
The classic abuse of rights argument.
Oh, cool. Exactly that.
He firmly argues that the problem isn't inherent in the Sharia framework of marital rights and duties. The fault, he suggests, lies elsewhere.
Where does he point the finger?
He points towards social factors, things like poor education, a decline in understanding true religious principles, maybe broader societal corruption or cultural issues that lead individuals, presumably husbands in this context, to misinterpret their rights or abuse their position violently.
So he separates the divine law from flawed human behavior. That's the essence of it. His argument is that the violence stems from ignorance and abuse, not from the properly understood principles of Sharia. The solution, in his view, wouldn't be to change the foundational law, but rather to focus on education, moral upbringing, and societal reform to correct the application of the law.
It's a defense that puts the onus on society and individual behavior, not the legal source itself.
Yes, it maintains the integrity of Sharia as the ideal, while acknowledging and attributing the real-world problems to human failings.
This whole exploration really changes the picture, doesn't it? We started thinking about Fali Abdel Al, the seasoned tax director, the expert on modern regulation.
Right, the figure associated with the complexities of the modern space financial machinery.
And instead, through this early work, we find a young, deeply engaged scholar dedicating himself to these huge foundational questions, synthesizing classical Islamic law with the demands of a modernizing, nationalistic Egypt.
It reveals the intellectual bedrock, you could say. It shows that his later focus on precise regulation and legal frameworks likely grew out of this much earlier, broader engagement with the very nature of law, justice, and society in Egypt.
His commitment was clearly deep, addressing these incredibly complex intersections of law, economics, and social justice that were defining his time.
Definitely. He wasn't just accepting the status quo, he was actively trying to provide rigorous, Sharia-based answers to the biggest challenges the country was facing.
So for you listening, the big takeaway here is seeing how someone known for a specific, quite technical field later in life actually started by wrestling with these fundamental philosophical and legal questions. It shows Fathi Abdel Al's early commitment to defending Sharia principles across the board, economic, legal, social.
It adds a whole new dimension to understanding his career and his intellectual contribution. It wasn't just about tax codes, it was built on this deeper foundation.
Absolutely. Which brings us to our final thought, something for you to ponder. This manuscript makes it crystal clear that these intense debates about fitting religious law into modern secular states, about ethical finance, about gender roles, and justice, they weren't invented recently. They were alive, kicking, and being debated at the highest intellectual levels back in the Nasser era.
Right. We see Abd al tackling them explicitly.
So the question is, does realizing the sheer continuity of these exact arguments framed so clearly back then change how we see these debates today? Does it suggest that maybe these are less about linear progress and more like fundamental, perhaps cyclical tensions that societies continually grapple with?
That's a really provocative question. Are we constantly revisiting the same core dilemmas, just in slightly different contexts? Seeing it laid out so clearly by a scholar like Fathi Abdel Al decades ago certainly makes you think about the nature of these ongoing societal arguments, something to definitely mull over.